absence, they'll probably end up deferring it. It's going to be responsibility.
Okay, good evening ladies and gentlemen and welcome to tonight's council meeting. I'd like to welcome all this evening. For those who haven't been here this morning, councillors are assembled across the table here and we're here to conduct tonight's proceedings. Can I take the opportunity tonight to also welcome Councillor Christine Stowe from the City of Wilson. Thanks for joining us this evening. You're also more than welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting or leave as you please. If you're here for a particular item, more than welcome to stay for that. Question time, public question time requires questions to be answered to complete these forms here. And I do need to stress any items in relation, any questions in relation to tonight's agenda can't be actually asked. We have to debate that. We can't actually deal with the matter until it comes up for consideration. We can deal with specific questions too in relation to any other matter. More importantly, that you make the questions specific and to the point. We don't want to hear preamble, unnecessary dialogue. For the simple reason we need to go through the agenda as prescribed in tonight's table of contents. So without further ado, I'll commence tonight's meeting.
Mr. Mayor, as foreshadowed in to be consistent with other previous other events similar, I was going to propose that we have a moment's silence recognising the Paris attacks.
So a condolence motion of some sort, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well we might do that now, ladies and gentlemen, a condolence motion now. We might stand for a minute's silence for those who are affected during those terrorist attacks overseas. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Okay, we'll commence tonight's meeting. Most of you have copies of agendas that have been left on your seats. You're more than welcome to follow the agenda as we progress through the meeting. Item number 1, the membership is as listed. Do we have any apologies for this evening, councillors? I've received one from Councillor Angela Vella. She's ill. She won't be attending. Item 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest, councillors?
None, Mr.
Councillor Lawrence.
Mr. Mayor, I've just got a couple of conflicts of interest. I've got a conflict of interest by way of close association due to family members owning property in relation to 8.14 and 8.15. And I also have an interest or a conflict of interest. I'm just trying to read it and understand what I have in relation to print services tender evaluation, in that it considers a number of local and northern suburbs printers that I've sent work to or had dealings with in my professional role.
Thank you, councillor. And you'll mention those when it comes to a vote. You'll be vacating the chamber.
I'll be vacating the chamber. I think there's 3 or 4. It's a bit hard to tell because people are using different names.
Okay.
But I'm still researching that.
Thank you, councillor. Any other further conflicts from councillors? If not, we're on to item 5. So I beg your pardon, item 4, confirmation of minutes of council meetings. We've got 2 meetings there, and they're on page 1. Have someone move that, please. Councillor Williams, second to Councillor Cetus, moving both.
Just a question.
Stand, please, Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, and that's for the ordinary council meeting on the 19th and the statutory meeting.
That's correct, both. Move Councillor Williams, second Councillor Cetus. All those in favour? That item is carried. As you see, Council, we've tweaked the order a bit. We've now got our reports at the end of the meeting, so we can proceed straight to public question time. If there's any member of the gallery that wishes to ask a question, please ensure that you've completed that form, and I'll take it over to you guys if you have any questions in relation to any council matter. And we've got Oki over there to assist you with a microphone so we can hear the question clearly. I'll need you to state your name and just the suburb where you live and your question, please. So over to you guys. Any questions from the gallery? Hands up, please, so we can see who's it. Gentleman at the back there, please, Oki.
Hi, Mr Mayor. My name is Chris Anderson. I live in Bristol on Paddy Road. Amendment C152 was an amendment designed to substantially increase the Zealand endowment. It was rejected by Richard Lee on the grounds that he believed that there was insufficient community consultation. Is C152 dealing with what is the current percentage of MRZ endowment? Is it 11% or 32%? Has been around. Is Council now satisfied with this voluntary output amount of MRZ, which has been bandied around? And in contrast with our neighbouring councils, with more than double of this figure of 32%.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just answer that in brief. First of all, C152 has been rejected by the Minister, and we're in a process of actually seeking more clarity from the Minister's Department as to why it has been rejected. We're not very happy at all with the 11% that's been proposed, was proposed. We're actually going to seek further action as to what's required to increase that along with our neighbouring communities. And like I said, we're far from satisfied with that. Our neighbouring councils have received rate of protection for their neighbourhoods, and we'll be hoping that we can hopefully achieve something similar with more dialogue with the Minister's Department. Any further questions? Yes, lady in the front there, please, Oki, over here.
My name is Ian. Please excuse me, Mr Mayor, for not standing.
No problem.
We're in Austral Avenue, and the plans are to close off Austral Avenue partway, and also to put, I'm not sure, berms or slow points, speed humps down Austral Avenue. The closing off of Austral Avenue is brilliant. We think that's a wonderful suggestion. But our question is it possible to withhold on the speed humps or the berms temporarily, just to see whether the closure actually has a good effect, which is what's wanted, because berms will reduce parking areas, and there are a lot of houses in that street which don't really have driveways. Speed humps, while it gives that current access from Gull Street, then the speed humps will be almost unnecessary. So that's our question.
Okay. Thanks for that, Yvonne. I might pass it over to the CEO to direct the question to an officer for a little bit more clarity as to what's proposed, where we're at with that, and where we need to go, more importantly.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I can ask, we will take that on board, the suggestion, and we'll get back to you in a couple of days with what we could do with that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Any further questions from the gallery? Gentleman over there, please, Oki, blue shirt.
Hi, my name's Vince Duke. I'm a resident in Queen Street. I'm here tonight, and I have got a number of other residents here that are here to talk about an issue that's listed for tonight. I've just got some general questions that I'm hoping you can help us with. Firstly, just in relation to the removal of the chicane in Queen Street that occurred about 18 months ago. Why was this done, and what was Council's expected impact on speed and traffic flow in Queen Street as a result of the removal? Second to that, I'd like to know whether Darabin traffic engineers believe the chicane could be removed because they're basically ineffective and redundant, and they're not an effective method of slowing vehicles down, or was the decision actually made to increase traffic? And just one other question, I'd also like to know who initiated the planned major reconstruction program in Northern Hay Street that now includes concrete curving, reconstruction of existing crossings, new asphalt, new low profile entry treatment, replacing the speed humps with speed cushions, and in one-way traffic slow forms to reduce speed. Was there any speed trap data analysis done to complete this? And was there any impact study done to understand what the effect would be of that traffic now potentially going down Queen Street? I'd also like to know there's a similar impact study done based on the new speed cushions or speed control measures that were put into Tyler Street, and whether any impact study was done to understand the effects of those measures on Queen Street as well.
Thanks, Vance. You've actually asked quite a few questions there. We'll actually need to get back to you with much more detail. Councillor William has actually proposed a general business item tonight, which will call for a report to actually look at some of those items you've mentioned. And you've also got, I think, access to a traffic report, which I don't think all councillors have seen, but may need to actually have a better understanding of once that report comes back to us. Thank you. Any further questions? Oki, lady at the front here, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hanning. I live in Rathbone Street, Fairfield, and just bear with me, this is the first time
No, that's fine.
I'm here tonight in regards to, I put in a petition in April this year in regards to item 8.1, a dog off lead area in Johnson Park, Northcote, with 424 residents have signed the petition. And the questions I've got is, when I've read the report, the recommendations and so forth, when will the decision be made? I mean, this has been going on since April, and I've been engaging with Craig, I can't remember his last name, and it's been rescheduled every month at your meeting. So I just want to know what the process is and what the next step is, and when I can tell the people that have been asking me about when an off-lead area will be approved.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, we actually can't go into too much detail on that matter. It's actually an item we're considering tonight. Yeah. Can I encourage you to stay for the meeting, and you'll actually hear from councillors the recommendation and discussion for that recommendation too. So, yeah. It hasn't been discussed, it's been debated tonight, and I actually can't give you any answer yet. I beg your pardon?
You said it's going to be discussed.
No, nothing to do with you guys. You've had your input already with the consultation. Council will make a decision tonight.
And then what will I know?
All residents will be notified. There'll be notification tool. Please stay for the debate and discussion, and you'll get a better idea on where it's going to go, but residents will be notified, absolutely.
Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify one thing. Michelle mentioned that it had been delayed. It hasn't. This is the first time it's actually come to the council chamber, so I think it's the first time that councillors have actually seen the proposal to hear it. So this is the first time that we will have actually had it come to the chamber.
There might have been delays from the officer level in relation to getting a report together through the consultation, but I can't explain that. We're here now tonight to discuss and debate that. Okay. Well, we'll discuss it and deal with it tonight. Okay. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Oki, any other questions from the gallery? Gentleman at the back, please. Oki.
I attended the last meeting, and I put a question to the council regarding the hall hire at Cookdale Avenue, and I was advised that I would be notified as to what the decision was, and I haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, Steve, I do apologise for that. We'll check the records to see if one has been sent, if it's still in transit, but you'll definitely get one before the end of the week. So currently,
well, that's one, right? Another was when I actually found all the services of the council. So one of the councils that were aware of this, right? I found these services over 5 weeks ago, and no inquiries regarding Manabella, which is Clyde Street, which we used to use. Now, been 5 weeks, and no one's got back to me. So the customer focus really works.
Thanks, Steve. Make sure that's included in your question, and we'll respond to it. Any further questions from the gallery? Oki, gentleman in the front, please. Can you please make sure those forms are submitted for our for collection? If they haven't been filled in, please do make sure they are. Oki, gentleman in the front here, blue top.
incidents over in Elm Street. This question relates to the Acre Village Traffic Management Plan. Is it appropriate to ask the question now?
You can ask the question, but we may not give you an answer. It will be discussed and debated tonight.
Well, it's an answer that needs contemplation. The plan has many excellent aspects, but there's one way of trying to control that flow of through traffic that seems obvious, and that is to make a no right turn facility after Jessie Street opening. How did the committee consider that as a possibility? Because we all know, common sense tells us that if you block off Austral, the through traffic will move one short block further on and go down Aaron Street. So that we're in sympathy with the people in Austral Avenue who think it's brilliant, but their problem will now become ours. So I'm asking, was a U-turn facility considered for the Jessie Street inlet? Thank you.
Okay. I'll have to refer that to the CEO. I might take that on notice. I'm not sure exactly how that's been addressed.
Yeah, I'm sure that consider that, but I'm unable to give an answer right now. But we will get back to you with those details, and unless there's a question from the councillors in a similar manner, we will make it part of the discussion. Otherwise, we have to get back to the gentleman.
We'll certainly respond in some shape or form, and there's also an item that's going to address the whole traffic precinct area tonight. Any further questions from the gallery? Gentleman at the front there, I'll give you right next to you.
Yes, my name is Peter Brown. I'm Austral Avenue. Just wondering about those trees in Austral Avenue. They're very invasive. Just wondering, is there any chance of them being removed, or what's the council's policy on that?
We can do a site inspection of the street and check the condition of those trees and see what impact they have on footpaths, curb and channel, and other potential safety issues, and conduct a report and an assessment. Thank you. Make sure that's written and submitted to the... Yeah, thank you. Any further questions? Lady back down here, please, Oki.
My husband just talked about the trees. The trees at this time of the year have dropped tons of pollen, which blows into our houses, and any cars parked underneath those trees get stained by the tea tree, what do you call it? Well, tannin, yeah.
Okay.
So that's, I just wish to add that.
Fine, we'll take that into account as well. Thank you for that. Are there any further questions from members of the gallery? John over there, blue shirt again.
So I just one further question. I'd just like to know whether I can have clarified what the speed limit actually is in Queen Street, because we had a report done by council that indicated that it was 60 kilometres an hour, which is a little bit hard to understand when at the end of the street you've got 40 kilometres over on a dual carriageway, which is High Street, yet Queen is being listed as 60. And in the comparative data that they provided, King William Street was listed at 50. So it's actually in the information that I sent to all of you there, you'll see that there's that. I don't know whether that's an anomaly or whether that's a deliberate thing, but if that is the case, I think it's quite alarming. And also within that data, there's 111 cars per day that are actually exceeding 60 kilometres an hour anyway. So, but yeah, if someone can clarify for me whether that is 40 or 50, in fact 60, whether that's correct.
We'll check on the data there, Vance. I'm sure all residential streets are 50 unless prescribed by some other signage.
We've got no signage, so it's probably...
It's got to be 50, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll check on that and get back to you to confirm that. Any further questions from the gallery? Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please do stay for the meeting if you intend to, or we can leave at your own leisure. Okay, we'll now proceed with the rest of the items that's listed on tonight's agenda. Next item is item 6, the Port and Standing Committees. We have 6.1, the Audit Committee. We have a recommendation there.
Happy to move.
Moved Councillor Walsh, second Councillor Lyons. If there's no discussion or debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item's carried. Next item is item 7.1, Assembly of Councillors held. We have a recommendation there.
Happy to move.
Moved Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Greco. There's no comment or debate there. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Item 8, consideration reports. 8.1, dog off lead area at Johnson Park, Northcote. Move Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Greco. Councillor McCarthy has moved. Councillor Greco, you wish to second on it?
With a slight amendment.
Can we hear that amendment first, please?
It's on screen.
Yep, it's up there, the red line, that's my amendment.
Move is happy with that?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it brief. We've got a lot of items on the agenda. I want to start off by thanking the residents who've come along tonight, including Michelle, who spoke earlier about this issue, and I understand as one of the people that got the petition together of over 400 signatures, 424 residents. I've actually been contacted by residents who've signed this petition who are really excited about this is finally coming to council for consideration. I had a message just before from one of them saying, please make sure this gets through. This is a long time coming for residents in Johnson Park who want to, and I think quite legitimately have for a long time been asking council to consider this proposal for an off-lead area at Johnson Park. And I would just make the point that this proposal seems to have sat at the management level. It hasn't come to the chamber. I wish it had come earlier, but this is the first time we've actually considered it in this room, so I'll be finding out why it's taken so long, because it is a really important proposal for local residents, particularly a lot of women, and this was the case for women that have spoken with me who use Johnson Park. It is a great recreational area. They want to be able to run with their dogs, to be able to recreate, and actually council sanctioning this space, and in this case proposal for the northern section of the park to be designated. It currently has no other recreational activities taking place there, so it has a lot of merit in terms of going forward. What we'd be doing tonight if we pass this motion is starting the process. There's a 28-day process that council is required to go through with any declaration of an area as off-lead, where we allow anyone to make a submission. We already have 424 people saying they want us to go ahead in this direction, so I think the response from the community will be very strong. And once that process is completed and that public notice period has occurred, then council can actually proceed down that path. So this is really saying we want to do this, and unless there's any significant issues that anyone can raise, or maybe a change in the location slightly, whatever it might be, then this would really be council endorsing this process going forward. It is important that we provide places and spaces in this city for people to get around, to recreate, and particularly when they have dogs, to feel safe that they can do that they're supported to do that, and we know what an important element of community life that is for people to be able to get out and amongst in our local parks. And of course that's why we have off-lead zones. There is an off-lead area at All Nations Park, but this particular location, Johnson Park, actually services the whole section across to Fairfield and even parts of Alphington as well, not just Northcote, where it's predominantly based. So I'll end it there, Mr Mayor. I congratulate the residents for their work in getting this to us, and I hope councillors support this proposal, and hopefully in come 28 days we'll be able to go that next step.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Greco, anything to add?
Mr Mayor, look, just very quickly, I just added a slight amendment there, the writing that's in red, and whilst I know that Councillor McCarthy's covered the issue fairly extensively, and the report speaks for itself, but I think it's important also that apart from putting a public notice in the newspaper, that we actually advise the surrounding residents. I haven't put a limit there, whether it's 500 metres, or I'll leave that up to the discretion of the officers in terms of they can best work out who they need to inform, because I think we need to inform both the dog owners and also the families that have children, because families that have children that will use in that particular area of the park where there's going to be possible off-lead, that they need to be informed about that, and also that we can get their feedback. So I welcome the report, and also I'm looking forward to seeing what the feedback is from the community.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any further comments? Councillor Seeders?
Mr Mayor, thanks. I don't want to really vote against this, but I do have concerns which I had foreshadowed on an email for councillors, and it's certainly matters arising from what took place at Bunnings not even a couple of weeks ago with respect to a little girl that got bitten in store. I noted that there was an email from Councillor Lyons which actually went to the heart of the concerns that I had, and that is that we probably would require some treatments of the park, particularly in relation to sectioning off that area from any possible interaction with kids, cyclists and the rest, because we do receive periodic complaints from other areas in which we've had off-lead areas, namely All Nations Park. So with that, I would propose an amendment to councillors moving and seconding that with regards to any possible capital works that goes in there that they've referred to for our consideration in this year's capital works allocation.
Mover?
I think that goes without saying. Happy to support that.
Yep, okay. So if you can jot that down for our minute takers there, please, Councillor Suidas.
That'll be, Mr Mayor, with your indulgence, that'll be a point 4.
Point 4.
Yep.
Okay, which you'll send. Councillor Walsh?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief, but I think that this is a welcome. This will be a welcome welcome development. Obviously, we need to. We've got the petition, and obviously congratulations to the residents for organising the petition. But I do think it is important to obviously to go through the process and to make sure that because this is going to be potentially a significant change for some people, and so it is. So I support Councillor Greco's amendment, because that sharpens up the communication and the consultation process.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If there's no further debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Next item is 8.2, Finance Report, 3 months ended September 30th. Move Councillor Walsh. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lee. Councillor Walsh, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr Mayor, obviously rise to move the report. The report paints quite a positive and solid picture for council's finances at the moment. Obviously, we've got an operating surplus of 85.34 million. And I was relieved to see that we're 4.2 million ahead of the year to date in terms of the budget. So that indicates that we're building things under budget, which is obvious. Which, if we can do that, it's obviously a favourable thing, and so hopefully this work of the council's financial team can continue, and through the CEO, Mr Dev, please pass on my congratulations to the financial team.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Lee, anything to add?
Just a very brief comment, Mr Mayor. The report highlighted that we spent $6.22 million to date, or up to end of September anyway, in the Capital Works program, which is actually $110,000 ahead of the Capital Works budget. I think is one of the few times that I actually seen that coming ahead. So congratulations to the staff involved, because that's really what we hear about, improving the livability of the city, be it through the traffic management program we're going to talk about later on, or renew some of our outdated infrastructure. So I think that is worthy of notation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any further comments? If there's not from councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item, 8.3, Amendment C133, Part 2, adoption of it. Do we have a mover? Move Councillor Lawrence. Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Seconder, Councillor Gregor. Councillor Lawrence? On page 16, it's a long way down. Tags, we need tags. Keep going, keep going.
Keep going, sir.
Keep going, long way. It's up there,
I'll get there.
It's up there. It's on the board.
Yes, Mr Mayor, just briefly, this is a very small amendment, much smaller than the amendments that have been referred to by Public Gallery earlier, C152, that covers the whole city, virtually, residential. This covers a small part of the city which relates to the development zone around Polaris, and is part of a series of amendments which were designed to clean up some anomalies that existed from the previous planning incarnations that we do each year.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Gregor?
Look, nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor. Just very procedurally, this is a request to the Minister for the final sort of sign-off in relation to this amendment process. So hopefully the Minister will sign off, and therefore we can actually include this particular amendment as part of the available credit scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. If there's no further comments from councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.4, Chandler Bridge Upgrade Project, incorporating the express bus lane.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that item, but with a variation to the recommendation. As indicated to councillors, I've got a proposal to incorporate 3 of the points in my notice of motion, which also deals with this item, and which is generally consistent with the thrust of the report. So if I can just indicate to councillors what that change would be. It would be in point 2 of the recommendation, after the word report, which is the end of the sentence in point 2 of the recommendation, to add the words, so after the word report, to add the words incorporating the following changes. And then, if I just draw councillors' attention to the notice of motion, it would simply be to slot points 2, 3 and 4 of the notice of motion at that point. So if I draw councillors' attention to page 120, the notice of motion, points 2, 3 and 4.
Give councillor a moment to look at it.
This will save us time, Mr. Mayor,
yes,
by dealing with the same item twice.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
So just to get some clarity, so we're inserting point 2, 3 and 4 of the notice of motion at what...
So in point 2 of the recommendation, after the word report, to add the words incorporating the following changes,
2, 3 and 4. Yep.
And then 2, 3 and 4 would be slotted in and renumbered accordingly.
Okay, so page 120, points 2, 3 and 4 from the notice of motion to be included into item 2, condition 2 of the recommendation on page 21.
So, just to be, Councillor McCarthy, a question to Councillor McCarthy, you still plan to specify the a 6-lane highway? The specify
does not support a 6-lane Chandler highway, so
it's consistent with the position that's conveyed in the report, which is that the emphasis to the Chandler duplication should be about improving mobility, not just the number of vehicles. And so we want to have an emphasis on public transport, cycling, pedestrians, and the Vic Roads proposal at the moment is purely about cars and trucks moving through the area rather than improved local mobility. So I'm happy to explain that as I speak to it.
Mr. Mayor, look, for the benefit of keeping the debate flowing, I'm happy to second it, so that Councillor McCarthy's got more time to explain.
Thank you, and I appreciate the clock. Look, I'll just point to the thrust of points 2, 3 and 4 in the notice of motion, and why I've proposed that they be incorporated into Council's submission to the Chandler Highway consultation process. These are the points, in fact, that we have already considered in this chamber in terms of the emphasis on dedicated public transport lane as part of the duplication, an emphasis on future-proofing the Chandler Highway duplication to think about what is it we're trying to do here, and given that there are going to be potentially 4,500 to 5,000 new residents living at the Amcor site directly to our south, we want to make sure that those people are not all getting in the car, but are in fact have other transport options. Otherwise, Heidelberg Road, Grange Road, all the way up to Plenty Road are going to become bottlenecks if anyone heading north, and of course getting out into the Eastern Freeway and heading south through Kew likewise will suffer the same fate. So we need to start to think about integrated transport, sustainable transport, and hence the emphasis here is that the current design, which is 6 lanes on the west side of the existing bridge, puts a huge burden on the residents who live immediately in that section. They will have a 6-lane freeway effectively built at the front of their homes when there is ample space on the Amcor side where it's sitting vacant. There is a road reserve available there, and there is a capacity to negotiate to either put some of it on the east, some of it on the west, to be a little bit more creative. And I've attended all the consultation sessions. I know other councillors have also attended, and it is the overwhelming feeling of our residents that they want to see a more sophisticated approach to this project. There is a few things that Vic Roads can do to make some changes, and of course to actually have a dialogue with Public Transport Victoria, who up until now have not been involved in the design process at all. That's what our officers' report really pushes very strongly, and hence also the additional points which I believe strengthen our submission and go to the heart of what our residents have been saying, which is that they don't want it all on the west. They'd like the Amcor development to take some of the brunt of this this proposal as well, given that at the moment no one actually lives there. So that's an important consideration. And the other key point here is that if you're going to spend $110 million on duplicating a very short stretch of road, in this case replacing or building a new road alongside an existing bridge, you actually want to have an outcome. And in this case we want to have an outcome for local people, not for a major regional transport corridor, because once they get to Grange Road, they've got nowhere to go. It's a single lane in either direction, and where do they go beyond that? So we want to see improved transport for local people, not more trucks and cars funneling through the area. Vic Roads has acknowledged at their forums that they see this as a regional project rather than a local project, but I don't believe that's what residents in Darren want, nor in the broader area. So I'll end it there, Mr Mayor, and hopefully councillors support this merging of the two concepts and save us time later on in the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lawrence, question?
I've got a question. Mr Mayor. Yeah. Just on the insertion that's occurred on 2B-II or whatever you call it, so it's the last clause in 2 that's been inserted. It says build-in future-proofing design options for the construction of the Doncaster Rail, and I understand that this was raised by the previous mayor in a letter from the Mayor of Bangor. I just wanted to know a bit more about that future-proofing. So does that mean the bridge should have rail capacity, or and where is the land needs to be delineated for that program?
Happy to answer that, explain that very quickly if you wish, Mr Mayor. The Doncaster Rail development study, which was completed under the previous government, designated along the Eastern Freeway, along the median, there would be a Kew Chandler station, which would actually be located underneath the existing Chandler Highway, the overpass there over the freeway. And the notion there was that this would service both residents and commuters to the south in Kew and Hawthorn, and people to the north, in our case, Elphington. And it was really primarily to take the burden off Elphington station and actually have people at the Amcor site getting on at a Kew Chandler station, which would sit underneath the current Chandler Highway Bridge. The emphasis here is that in order to get people from sites like Amcor, where you've got 5,000 people, a new suburb, you need a high frequency bus service to get them on and off, which is the case in a lot of European cities where the train station's over there, the population's there, people catch the bus, get on the train, it all connects. And that was actually the notion that was outlined in that report. That report is still live. It has, even though the current government has not committed to it, Public Transport Victoria's 20-year rail development plan does talk about Doncaster Rail as a key feature in giving people that option in the outer east to not be driving along the Eastern Freeway, but instead there. So the provision component is actually the capacity to have a dedicated public transport lane from the Amcor site across down to that point, and of course the engineering of it is not something I'm going to go into now, but it's about future-proofing. It's not about rail lines on the Chandler Bridge. Yeah. I'll just make that point. It's actually about spur railway. That's a completely different approach. That's
a very detailed traffic engineer's report, so I think you missed your calling a light there. Yeah. That's been answered, Councillor Lawrence? Yes, I think that has. Thank you. Councillor Greco as seconder.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll speak as the second. I just want to raise some points that Councillor McCarthy has touched on. Firstly, I think in relation to this major project, I think we have to view it from the perspective, not from a roads versus public transport perspective. We have to view it from a much more comprehensive framework, and that is looking at, okay, what are the transport solutions in relation to this particular area, which is at the basically at the bottom end of Darebin. And why I say that is that often in the past the practice has been that Vic Roads looks for road transport solutions, and then the Public Transport Authority looks for public transport solutions. I think we have to combine the two together. That's a much more sophisticated way of dealing with things, and I think that's where Melbourne is way behind many other major cities in the world, where they now look at transport issues from much more from a global perspective of the interaction between public transport and private transport. That's the first issue that I like to raise. The second point that I think that's been raised here, that if you look at the options that have been put forward by Vic Roads, basically our resolution as it stood, it basically endorsed the Vic Roads option, the preferred option, and I think that it's quite problematic just on the plans that or the details that have been provided by Vic Roads. And if you look at and in particular I want to refer to in relation to where the bridge is going to be, the new bridge is going to be located. At the moment it's located on the western side, and on the western side we know, and we've had representations in relation to this, that it's going to adversely affect the residents already in that area. Now it just seems so logical that given that the eastern side, which still has to be developed and is in a process of being designed, is that we look at the eastern side as a better place to.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comments, Councillor Sudis?
Mr Mayor, thank you very much. I don't think this is going to go anyway. The government has already, and Councillor McCarthy would remember the earlier workshops about 4 years ago, the structural concerns are the ones that is the sticking point between east and west. There's a century-old sewerage system that runs underneath the creek bed, which apparently has been factored in as a potential cost blowout in terms of where the bridge is sited. What is novel about this consideration is us talking about where it banks. Quite frankly, that may well be one of the positions that we put to the City of Yarra, because that stretch actually falls within their municipality, to advocate to the state government that one of two things may need to occur. That with increased volumes, when this bridge is ever built, in whatever form that it's built, may need to consider doing one of two things: compulsory acquisition to get them out of there, or significant sound treatments in order to buffer them from the noise. Now, they're not going to escape. So this notion between east and west is a furphy. What design configuration it takes ultimately will be determined by the state government. We can say whatever we like, but ultimately it's their call, Mr Mayor, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Sudis. Councillor Walsh?
I have an amendment. I've just got a slight concern about this.
What's the amendment?
I'm wondering if we could take out put 2A.
Councillor McCarthy?
2A.
And then I'm happy to support it.
I'm happy to consider a slight wording change, but I think the emphasis is on the second half of the sentence, which is so if it's more about not supporting the current proposal for a six-lane bridge.
So the wording is the issue, Councillor?
Is the wording?
Yeah, the wording about not supporting.
What's the wording you want to insert?
I guess not supporting. So I thought we had already discussed this before the meeting.
If it moves things along, I'm happy to remove point A, because it's actually point B which puts the affirmative position, and so I'm happy to remove point A.
Point A is eliminated, it's removed.
In that case, I'll speak for.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you.
I hope it's something new, Councillor Walsh.
Look, it is important that we support it. It's such a big issue for residents in Elphington, and the reason why I support it, I wanted to take it out, is because I don't think for six lane highway is necessarily the best way. But if we're wanting more increased public transport, it may be better off to say to the state government and to work with the City of Yarra and to do a bit of a trade-off and say, okay, if you're dead set on six lanes, we want we want public transport, because you need to have a bit of a trade-off, and I want us to be in a good position to have a trade-off which would ultimately be the best thing. Ultimately be the best thing for the residents, and ultimately give this proposal more chance of us being able to advocate for stronger public transport, which is important.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. There's no further comments. Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, I just did have a question to the mover and also possibly the officers. We've been presented by Vic Roads with a number of options which have gone basically east-west or 6 or 4, and basically variations on those two variables. Now, when you look at it, the option for 4 lanes on the east side is the most palatable for our residents, and I call them our residents because it used to be part of Northcote, and I used to live there.
Question, Lawrence, you said you had a question.
So my question is that the bike connections are still inadequate on the best option, number 4. In particular, there needs to be better connections and an underpass for pedestrians and bikes on the northern bank of the Yarra. At the present so-called good option, it actually has the bikes running up one way and then cutting across the other. And it doesn't matter whether the road is on the east or the west, you're either going to disadvantage the current community or disadvantage the new community. And so there's some finer detail that I hope is in our submission.
Okay.
Not so much a question as a comment, and
That's how I took it too, thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors.
Can we have that noted as unanimous, please, Mr Mayor?
Noted, yes.
Thank you.
Next item is 8.5, our
Mr. Mayor,
policy.
if I can, with your indulgence, to suspend standing orders to consider, and should have done this at the outset. That items 8.17.
Can I take a vote to suspend standing orders? All those in favour?
Second.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Moira.
No.
Go ahead.
That's right. That items 8.17 and 8.18 be considered to be moved on block.
So
817 and 818?
Yeah.
Happy to second.
Happy to second the councillor.
So can we have a clear which ones are we?
817, 818. Okay. Second to Councillor Lee. There's no discussion, no debate on those. They're statutory requirements. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Okay, those items are dealt with. They've been moved en bloc. And now I'll put that to a vote to move them en bloc. I'll move.
Second.
Seconded. Sorry, moved Councillor Seaver, second Councillor Williams. I'll put that to a vote again. That's better. Now it's moved en bloc. Thank you. Back to 8.5, procurement policy.
Look, I'm happy to move this, Mr. Mayor, and I've got a slight amendment.
Yep.
Which is essentially an additional dot point.
Yep. Move Councillor Greco.
Happy to second.
Second Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, firstly, just to give some background, I'll spend a minute or a minute and a half just to give some background in relation to the policy itself, and then talk to my amendment. Hopefully, in the meantime, it will come up on the screen, well, there it is, point number 3. Well, firstly, this is the Council's procurement policy. We're required as a council to review our procurement policy every 12 months, and that's what we're doing right here. What this policy sets out, as you could see in the report, in the appendix of the report where the policy is actually stated there, it's a high-level policy. That is, that it doesn't go into the actual details of what the guidelines are in relation to the policy, but it sets some high-level principles and high-level standards that we're required to meet in relation to the various procurement activities that the council undertakes. And so I understand that the guidelines will actually be developed as an evolving process in order to define what the guidelines are that then best meet these principles that we've stipulated here. The policy basically just makes one small change where it increases one limit from $5,000 to $10,000, and so that's only the minor change. Everything else is basically remains the same. And again, I stress this is a high-level policy. I'd like to spend the next minute and a half that I have in relation to the point 3 there on the board, which is it's in relation to actually now looking at how we can better develop the guidelines that sit under this overarching procurement policy. And particularly what I am concerned about is that how we can better shape our social procurement aspects of this policy. Council is one of the biggest employers in the city of Darebin, has a budget of over $150 million a year. And we have massive contracts in cleaning, catering and maintenance. And there's a great opportunity here where we can actually increase the potential for local businesses to get more work out of Darebin's council. Not only local businesses in the city of Darebin, but local businesses in and around the city of Darebin, and also particularly how we can use our procurement policy from a strategic perspective in order to create and achieve higher employment levels and training opportunities and apprenticeships for our young people. Our young people here in the northern suburbs, it's alarming. It's alarming the level of unemployment of young people in the city of Darebin. So we can use the procurement policy for this. Many other organisations are currently doing this. The MAB is currently looking into this space of how councils can use their procurement policies in order to achieve better social outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lawrence, a second. Anything to add?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I've seconded this motion with the amendment moved by Councillor Greco, and who has a history, along with myself, of promoting this direction for council. We do have a 10% weighting in our procurements and tenders, and a Darebin Plus approach, which is to promote the regional economy where our residents get their jobs, which is not just in Darebin but surrounding areas. There was just this week launched a report on the future of the workforce in the northern suburbs and 8 cities in this region. Unfortunately, youth unemployment is sky high in Darebin, along with the city of Hume, along with the city of Whittlesea, along with the city of Moreland. So one of the things that the governments are looking to is small business to take up the employment slack with the closing of the whole auto industry. So it is very important that we do look at this social procurement and encourage Aboriginal enterprises, apprentices, people from our area. We have got pockets with 30% youth unemployment in them in our city. And again, this is where council spending is every year, it's very regular, and it can promote local jobs.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. If there's no further comments or debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.6, Traffic Management Plan, Projects and Delivery Process for 2015-16. Councillor Lee has moved. Councillor McCarthy second. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is certainly our signature budget item for the 2015-16 financial year, where Council has committed $1.5 million in looking at traffic management issues throughout the municipality. As part of that, we've received, as the report noted, over 3,000 responses from our community, and we hosted 3 community forums where over 100 people attended. I myself and a few other councillors attended a number of those. I attended 2, one in Preston, the Darebin Art Entertainment Centre, another one in Northcote Town Hall. And what came out loud and clear is that residents do want to have a coordinated approach, taking a more precinct-based approach. So it's not just about shifting their problem to the neighbours down the road or across the street. So with that in mind, the council has developed a whole series of traffic management strategies using the local area traffic management plan, and the diagrams and so forth is actually on page 35 of the report in terms of the precincts that we're looking at. I know the other councillors may want to speak on this, but I just want to highlight two key projects in particular which I'm very proud of. One is the $250,000 that's earmarked for the Old Port Village. I know that's due to be discussed under 8.7 below, and also another $200,000 for the Junction Area Master Plan. So both of those areas are in bad need of urgent renewal, and also in terms of addressing some traffic management and route running issues. So those 2 projects I'm very proud of because of the council's approach in working with our community and addressing some of those concerns, and I look forward to the regular updates that we receive from our Director of Business Assets and Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm so pleased this has finally come to us. This has been a long time coming, and I moved the original notice of motion calling on Council to adopt a citywide LATAM local area traffic management model similar to what already occurs in the City of Yarra and elsewhere. And we now have a sophisticated model whereby the schedule of works that need to occur in each part of the city are based on the evidence that we have, the aspirations of residents in those areas, and of course are budgeted for so that they do occur and they aren't put on the never never. I'm really pleased with in fact, some of the outcomes that we will see from this approach and the fact that they are very, in some cases, quite inexpensive but deliver a great benefit to those residents. One of them, which is in the Rucker Ward, is in Westgarth, which is noted as Precinct 28 in this model. And it's a push by local residents to do what's already been done in the Sumner Estate. And I note that Sumner Estate put a very strong submission in, which hasn't been funded as part of this proposal, and I look forward to seeing that be funded in the next round. But in this case, in Westgarth, there's been a very big push to move towards a 40-kilometre speed limit in that precinct, a real neighbourhood speed limit. There's a lot of pedestrian activity there. The train station, High Street, residents want to know and feel confident that they won't have rat running, and we're going to deliver that outcome here as long as VicRoads gives us the tick at a very small price. Likewise, there are similar outcomes that can be delivered across the board. The central premise to this is that where neighbourhoods want to move to lower speeds, Council works with them, as has occurred in other cities around the place. Most of around 80 or 85% of the City of Yarra has turned their local streets to 40k zones and put the busy traffic on the main roads. That means that kids can play in the streets, play cricket, kick a ball around, whatever it might be, and actually re-engage that community level. So this is a great outcome, and I hope to see great outcomes for other neighbourhoods in subsequent years.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Any further comments from councillors? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Next item is 8.7, the Oakover Village Transport Plan.
Happy to move again, Mr Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Lee, seconded Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Just follow on from what we just discussed previously. This item has deserved its own place on the agenda because it's an area that has long suffered from a lot of traffic and rat running issues. In fact, I recall running a GB item not that long ago in relation to the rat running around the Austral Road and Stoke Street and Bell Street and also Oakover Road area. Can I begin by thanking all the residents that participated in the Oakover Transport Plan, because many of them who are watching tonight on the web stream, they are very active and engaged part of our municipality, and they are also willing to take a considered approach within their neighbours and within their streets and consider the whole precinct as a whole. I also like to thank our officers who listened to our community and worked out in collaboration some of the innovations and solutions to the treatment plans that we put into the appendix. Of course, not all those plans will get 100% support, but I am pleased to hear and see the very high level of support. If you look at page 47 of the report, which generates very strong positive feedback from the community. As we heard through the public question time, there are still a couple of minor issues around Ulster Avenue and Erin Street, but I'm sure that our traffic engineers and our officers will be working in their usual manner, consulting with the community, look at how we can stage the works to ensure that they meet with the local community expectations, but also look at creative solutions so that the area the solutions are generated from the community in order to solve some of the problems that exist within our community. I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor, and I'll leave other councillors to have a chat about this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy, anything further to add?
Look, not a great deal to add other than to commend Councillor Lee on all the work that he's done with residents on this and other Casale Ward councillors as well. And I think this is an example of the precinct-based approach at work. And I think the example here is trying to find a way to deliver great outcomes street by street, and we've heard the questions this evening, and I hope that what we see here is the sort of positive safe street outcome that residents have been looking for. And I also make the note that in the implementation process of a precinct plan, sometimes things come to light where council needs to realise that it needs to adjust parts of the plan, and I would hope that we're listening very closely to resident feedback as we go forward to make sure that we get it right as we go forward as well. So I'll just end it there, and I think it's a really great outcome for that pocket, and I think a good example for what we can do elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Any further comments from councillors? Just want to reiterate that we're delivering stage 1, we're endorsing stage 1 with other works to be considered, and take on board the comments from the gallery members this evening as well. I'll now put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.8, amended Angkor Development Plan Proposal. Our response.
I'll move with a slight amendment that we add a 0.5 that says reaffirms the call for a joint advocacy committee with representatives from Ruckle Ward and also Wanwich Ward from Yarra, and also reaffirms support for educational and community facilities on the site.
Councillor Walsh, this is our response. Our response. It's separate to Yarra altogether, so I'm not too sure what we're doing with including Yarra at this level with that amendment. Can we hear that again, please? Maybe read that a bit.
Reaffirms the call for joint advocacy reaffirms the call for a joint advocacy committee with representatives from the Ruckle Ward with representatives from the Ruckle Ward. I'm happy to take up reference to Yarra.
It's a separate item, I think, Councillor Walsh, a completely separate item. So yeah, that needs to come out.
I think if I can assist Mr Mayor, I've just noticed Councillor Walsh refers to on page 63, there is a note about that we have not yet received a response from City of Yarra in regards to that proposal, which was more to do with the traffic and transport impacts as a result of the Angkor development. So it was, I think, if I'm correct, pushing Yarra Council to actually respond to that request in this case, rather than the developer's plan itself.
So can we get that on the screen, please? Councillor Walsh, give it to the minute taker so we can see what we're...
I'm happy to second that if it has those words regarding transport and traffic issues. Then we understand it.
I'm happy to do that.
Can we include another point there that we actually contact Joe and advising him that we're actually inviting him to participate in this? So another point, can we include that? So Councillor Walsh, we need to give that to the minute taker, please, so they can put it on the screen, so councillors are fully aware of what the content of the language is. Councillor Lawrence, did you want to second that, did you?
Yes.
I believe Councillor Lawrence was...
Councillor Lawrence is second. Oliver, Councillor Walsh, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This is obviously an important issue, and I'm going to speak to my amendment, and because it is very important that we do push out for this advocacy committee, because because a real hard issue for many residents in the south of in that part of Elphington. Residents from Clive Street, residents from Miller Street, and residents from Wilder Street. If you speak to residents from both streets, the biggest issue, I've no doubt the biggest issue, and when I speak to them, the biggest issue that they say is the Angkor site. It's their biggest issue. Yet Angkor is on the other side of the road. So these guys in a sense, they feel voiceless because it is outside our control, and so it's very important that we reaffirm our commitment and reaffirm our call to give local ward councillors, always a joint advocacy committee, so that we can support these residents who are in many ways voiceless in.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Lawrence, a seconder.
Yes, Mr Mayor, look, it's very regrettable that the built form design development overlay plan that's gone in ANCOR has not taken into consideration the views of residents across the road in the municipality, and of course in Darabin, and of course the residents in the Yarra portion of Alphington as well. Our council has gone to great lengths for development across the road on Heidelberg Road to be moderated to 3-storey forms and to fit in with the character of the area. And we're still going to be confronted with 14-storey monolith facing Heidelberg Road. That's the price of lack of consultation, and it's going to be a regrettable one on the built form. It also may be a regrettable one in the actual design and process. So I fully endorse this motion. I also fully endorse that we get together with Yarra and promote the traffic issues, which are severe there, and try and promote some solutions and try and influence some better outcomes in this project.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any further comments? Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I support the comments of the previous two councillors, but I just wanted to draw council's attention to the fact that this submission has already gone in, and our officers had to move quickly to meet the time frame, the statutory time frame. But I just want to draw council's attention to the details of our submission, which I found particularly interesting reading, because throughout our submission it essentially says, our position has not changed, you have not responded to our concerns. And I think if you were to put a letter over what the revised ANCOR plan actually is, it's a great big F, because they have failed to address the very valid concerns that residents on the Darabin side of Heidelberg Road have raised, and residents on the Yarra side have raised as well. And they go to the livability, the amenity, the traffic and transport issues, the open space issues, and the community facilities. There have been some movements, some carrots that have been waved in front of both the council and the community, but they simply don't go far enough. And when you're building a whole new suburb, which very rarely happens this close to the city, you'd like to think you're going to get it right. And if you're going to have 5,000 residents there, you'd like to think you're going to build it as an integrated, contemporary, 21st century place to live, not the massive yield and with all the expense borne by existing ratepayers at Yarra and ratepayers at the City of Darabin. So I think someone's got some big answers to give as to why this is even still being considered in its current form. I'd be very surprised if Yarra makes the final decision on this, because this is ultimately a planning process that the Minister will, I think at some stage, or VCAT will end up having a hand in. And I really hope that both the City of Yarra and the developer take on board these very valid concerns, which have been addressed not just in this submission but in our previous submission and have seemed to have been completely ignored, and that is extremely disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. If there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.9, the Multisports Stadium update.
Happy to move that, Mr.
Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Seedis. Councillor McCarthy.
Just very quickly, this report provides Council with a schedule for the timeline for the delivery of this project. Obviously, the biggest constraint for Council, as is outlined in the report, is the not getting the process right in terms of design and development and implementation, but probably more significantly in the era of reduced funding for local government is actually the funding component. And we are reliant, even though we have a significant investment as a council in this project, we are the chief funder, and we are bringing the bulk of the money to the table through our various contributions over many years. There is still a component of state and or federal money that needs to be received in order to make this happen, and ideally to bring it forward. At the moment, the project launch is tipped, based on the current schedule, to not occur until June 2019. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. Mayor, but that is well and truly into the next term of this council. It's a long way off. And as long as we're waiting until 2019 for this project to be delivered, we have particularly young girls, but families in this city being forced to go all the way across to Boroondara, Ashburton and elsewhere, and even out to Wanturna in some cases, to actually get a game. To get a game of netball or basketball, and often it is the case that the ones who miss out the most are the kids who are starting out because one child is playing locally in an open space, such footy or cricket or soccer, and the other child misses out because there's no facilities locally. So the deficit is one that our families, our local families bear, and I think we need to ideally get on with this and deliver this faster. It's a funding issue, and if council's not going to prepare to put the dollars into it or can't find the dollars, then we need the state and feds to come to the table and to come quickly, because this should be delivered at least in the next 2 years. 2019 is just, from my perspective, too far away, but obviously there's a lot of tranche of funding that we need to get into this picture to make it happen. So I'll end it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Seedis.
Yeah, very briefly, Mr Mayor, and this was foreshadowed as a point that you raised in a different forum with regards to page 67 of our report. I don't think, in light of our experience, certainly in the delivery of Keon Park Community Hub, nor for that matter Reservoir Leicester, as much as we would like to expedite the program, we're going to get anything better than what we got in the delivery of those two significant projects, which was about 4 to 5 years in their time frame. One thing to consider in all this, of course, is not so much the funding, because we have the significant bulk of the money all ready to go. So we get the sense that the state government is amenable, given the fact that we've got half the funding associated with this particular signature project. The problem, of course, is all the legal constraints that we have to go through, certainly with regards to probity and the whole sort of shebang in terms of getting tender programs up and going. So once those particular things, and you'll notice the timelines actually tick off a lot of those procedural constraints. There's no way of actually taking a shortcut with those, given the fact that they are prescribed in legislation in terms of what a responsible authority needs to do, or indeed whatever any other company needs to do in the public realm when it comes to these sorts of things. So for us, it's more about getting the process right, because any delay and any mistake associated with any one of these particular steps will actually blow the timelines out from 2019. I take 2019, in fact, to be quite an optimistic date, quite frankly, Mr Mayor. It's just the level of the complexity of the funding and the associated stakeholders that need to come to the party, because we do understand that there is a private interested party with relation to this. So we'll very well have 3 or 4 parties come together with us on this in conjunction with the state government. So it is a moving feast, and certainly when we talk about multi-sports and the ability to house multiple sports codes on one site, you're going to have that kind of work to do. So I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Seedis. Any further comments from councillors? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.10, Council Advisory Committee's update. We need an inclusion there.
Happy to move on with Councillor Greco in the vacant space there.
Move Councillor McCarthy. Do we have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Williams. Councillor McCarthy.
Just very quickly, this is just to correct some decisions in relation to the appointment of councillors to various committees, and of course to include one of the committees that was left off as part of that process as well at the statutory meeting. I'm pleased that Councillor Fontana, as Mayor, you'll be taking up the role to chair the Aboriginal Advisory Committee. I've had the pleasure of serving on that committee in the past. It is, I think, one of our most important committees in this city, and I'm sure Councillor Seedis would concur, having played that role as well, because it is it functions unlike any other committee in the city. It actually has made an extraordinary number of decisions and investments that will not only affect us now but into the future, so it has a great legacy. I'm also pleased that Councillor Williams will be the key council representative on the Domestic Animal Management Reference Group. I'm happy to support her as the proxy, and of course the East Reservoir Neighbourhood Renewal Steering Committee as well is no longer requires councillor representation. So I'll end it there. I think it's pretty straightforward, and we need to get on and make this happen.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams, anything further to add?
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. If there's no further comment, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Next item is 8.11, the footpath trading policy. We have a recommendation there. Move Councillor Lee, we have a seconder.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Greco. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the new policy is coming into effect, we are revoking the previous policy. As the report outlines, what this policy seeks to do is to replace some of those older clauses, or in fact introduce new clauses to make it easier for our traders to establish footpath trading. But we're also got to be mindful of the impact that has with signage and things like blinds and outdoor heaters and on-street parking for people that are using those streets, and of course pedestrians that use that shared space as well. So this is a policy that's probably somewhat overdue, and I'm glad that it's coming to our attention and it deserves to be endorsed tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Greco.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, very quickly, look, this policy has been developed by the officers. It's a long time coming. I think it's important that the updates in this policy actually bring the council into the 21st century in terms of, particularly in relation to, footpath trading. As we've seen over the years, footpath trading has become a very important part of business in the city of Darebin. Not only is it good for the traders, but as we've seen, it actually adds a lot of life to our city. And what the policy tends to do, it actually helps to try and standardise some of the look and feel of our city, particularly in relation to footpath trading, because it's no longer about the look and feel of what the shops are, but also what actually happens on the footpaths. And I think we need to get that right so that we can make it much more amenable to our residents, so they can have a great opportunity in the city of Darebin where they shop and attend restaurants and cafes. So I'm glad the policy has been put together, and I look forward to its implementation. I also like to note, Mr. Mayor, it's actually a point that you raised, there is a transition period in the policy, so those shops and traders that have existing arrangements will have until, I believe, the 1st of July to readjust themselves to the new policy. So there's ample room there for the traders to get themselves up to date with this existing policy. And I'm sure that our officers will be providing as much assistance to them as possible in order for them to start to comply with this new policy.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
I just want to quickly highlight that what this does is actually enable enforcements, and particularly that it reflects the legislation requirements, particularly in relation to the disability access requirement under the Disability Discrimination Act and Australian standards.
Glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Councillor Williams. If there's no further comments, Councillor Walsh.
I'm glad that this has come back because it has improved things and for trading, and reaffirms the issue of street stores. And I know there was there was concern that it was taking away people's ability to canvass petitions, but we've now fixed up this in regard to street stores. So I'm pleased that we've done that.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item's carried. Next item is 8.12, the Beavers Road Footbridge Feasibility Study.
I'm happy to move this, but I'd like to first of all suspend standing orders to allow me to table and seek leave to table a petition if it's possible for standing orders to be suspended.
Happy to second that suspension of standing orders.
McCarthy, I'll put that to a vote to suspend standing orders. Okay, Councillor Walsh. Okay, Councillor Walsh is now moving to submit the petition. We need a seconder to move.
Happy to second
distribution of the petition. Councillor McCarthy, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Carried. Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if we could, I'm just conscious that with the petition rules, we need to have the topic of the petition read in order for it to be admitted as a petition, and a number of signatures to be mentioned as well, if I'm correct.
Cool. Councillor Walsh, can you have someone distribute those whilst you read that out, please, so we can save time?
Yep, I'm happy to distribute it, and I know it's been emailed to all all councillors today. But there are 1,400 signatures on this petition, a total of 742 from Darwin and 398 or so from Moreland, and that's on top of a further 650 odd extra petition people signed a change.org.
And the topic, the title?
The topic is the Beavers Road footbridge and calling on the councils of Moreland and Darwin to fund a pedestrian and bike footbridge over the Mary Creek between Ceres and the Kingfisher Gardens, East Brunswick, and Beavers Road, Northgate.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If you can distribute those, we don't need any debate. They've been accepted.
Thank you. So
we'll need to resume standing orders. Move Councillor Greco, second Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Carried. Councillor Walsh.
And thank you.
We're now discussing the topic, the recommendation.
And thank you very much. I move.
Happy to second the amended recommendation.
Yep, and I've got my amendment up. My amendment up there. And I'm happy to speak to this and my amendment.
Are there any questions first in the amendment? I have one. Mr. CEO, over to the officer in relation to the recommendation here, in light of the extensive consultation and noting that some of these stakeholders have already done their budget for 2015-16. Is it appropriate that we actually consider something that we don't have any costs or charges on, and in terms of reference we've even thought about or discussed with the officer?
Yeah, we'll take it on board and we'll come back to you with the extent of the work that's required. Yeah, and if you're asking the questions about other organisation, I can't answer about that at the moment without asking them or time. But the mid-year budget review itself is, depends on the scale of. It's basically the study that we can consider, but it might end up as end of the year or halfway through the financial year. That's up to the council.
Councillor Walsh, you should speak to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to speak to this amendment, because this amendment is about harnessing the goodwill which has existed between so far, and with Moreland Council accepted a petition last week, and they are due to consider putting forward a motion to consider the feasibility study in their mid-year budget review. And I think that in light of that, the vibe is, and nothing official, is that they will match what we have, what we are proposing in terms of the feasibility study, which is a huge step forward in this project. So we need to harness the goodwill here, and because so that we can because basically it's about fast tracking the bridge. Tonight we tabled a petition with over 1,000 signatures on it. This includes an additional 650 people who signed a change.org petition. These were mostly Darwin residents. These residents want us to build the bridge, and they want us to do it ASAP. They don't want us to consider perhaps a feasibility study next year, and perhaps building it in a few years' time. If we put past this tonight, it opens the door and keeps up hope of us being able to fund this and build this as part of next year's budget. Wouldn't that be fantastic for the residents? And can I congratulate the residents and congratulate Julia Hall, who's here tonight, and for her tireless work. And she tells the story of of needing to get her kids safely to school. It's so many people like this whose stories that we hear, which is why we need to build this bridge.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Second, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Walsh has covered the issues very well, and this has been a big community campaign to get us to this point, and it's a big journey ahead to get this project not only through the feasibility stage but also into the capital works budget of not only Darebin but also Moreland. And I make reference to Moreland because the reception from Moreland Council has been overwhelmingly positive from all accounts. And on page 86 of the report, it outlines the existing relationship we do have with Moreland Council when it comes to roads and bridges that cover the two municipalities, whereby we jointly fund and jointly agree to these sorts of projects. So we need them on board. It sounds from all accounts like they are very much on board if we're going to proceed down this path. I just want to pick up one point which I think is worth considering, and it's considering the context of the quantum of money that would be required as per the report to deliver this project, which is that the report refers to the land on the Moreland side as being privately owned and therefore possibly not accessible. Now, councillors, I think, would be aware from emails today that land is actually potentially the Ceres site, and Ceres, of course, have signed on and said they're a key partner. They're owned by the City of Moreland. So there is a way to deliver this project that is potentially a lot less than is described in the report here, and that's why a feasibility study is required. And we have commissioned feasibility studies into a range of things, not only on our own boundaries but elsewhere as well. And if you do follow the Merri Creek and you head up there, there are a number of sections where there is an inadequate opportunity for safe pedestrian and cycling crossing, particularly for kids and parents with kids. And in this case, we have the rather surreal situation where residents and families on the Darebin side, in this pocket of Thornbury and Northcote, are zoned to go to East Brunswick Primary. That's actually the school that they're zoned to go to, and yet there is not a safe pedestrian crossing point for them and a riding point for them that is off the main roads of Arthurton Road or much further up Normanby Avenue as well. So this provides us with a great opportunity. The developers in that section have all expressed support, from what I understand, for this proposal. They see it as key to supporting the environmental amenity of this area, and I'll end it there, Mr Mayor, because the time has run out.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Any further comments? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item's carried. Next item is 8.13, a petition regarding litter and rubbish in the City of Darebin.
Happy to move that,
Councillor McCarthy, seconder. Councillor Sevis. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. I'll make this brief, Mr Mayor. This item arose from representations from one of the residents in Gladstone Avenue and other residents as well to the Rucker Ward councillors over this year, and I believe going back as far as last year, regarding an ongoing issue that's occurring in that location and quite possibly along St George's Road, which is that litter that is accumulating along the St George's Road median is finding its way onto the footpaths and pedestrian paths and nature strips of residents along roads like Gladstone Avenue and elsewhere. So there's been an earnest attempt by residents to see action in this space. This is not an issue that Council has complete jurisdiction over because we do not have the cleaning contract for that section of road, but we can take action, and there's some advocacy actions included in this report for Council to push strongly to PTV that they need to start taking charge of their litter problem, which goes through the middle of our city, and of course Melbourne Water is a key element in this as well. That's outlined, of course, on page 89 of the report. But in terms of what Council can do, there are some key opportunities here to increase the servicing of cleaning that site. It is a new emerging retail precinct with a few restaurants and cafes, and of course we need to make sure that all those businesses are well educated about maintaining their litter, because that St George's Road section, including this section near Gladstone Avenue, is part of the gateway to the city of Darebin from the south, and we want it to be nicely presented, and we don't want residents to have to spend every afternoon picking up rubbish. We need a more focused attempt. I'll just make the point as well, Mr Mayor, that the proposal in here is, with our litter and waste strategy, is that we really need to see much stronger action from those other agencies to match what we do as a council, because otherwise we're going to have an ongoing issue in our creeks, in our corridors, our transport corridors, and of course along the train lines and tram lines too. So I'll end it there. I appreciate the officer's attention to this, and most notably that the residents concerned will receive a copy of this report, and then it's up to them to raise any concerns if they have them beyond this point.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Cedars?
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
If there's no further comments from any other councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Next item is 8.14, the open air cinema proposal.
Move that, Mr Mayor, but with a...
Mayor, I'd just like to state a conflict of interest in regard to family member with property adjacent to this site, and I wouldn't be vacating the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move this, but with an additional point being point 4, which I have flagged with councillors prior to the meeting, which would read, I'm not sure if it's on the screen or not, no, I'll read it out. It would be point 4, endorses an additional screening at Mayor Park in December, to occur in December 2015, and an allocation of $2,000 for screen hire, subject to an evaluation report of the November 27 screening.
I'm happy to second that, but I also have a further amendment.
Let's hear your amendment to the amendment.
Yeah, no,
additional amendment.
It's an additional amendment, separate from that amendment.
Yep. Councillor Greco?
Yeah, the amendment is, I've just handed it in about a few minutes ago to our support staff, but it's basically in relation to point 3. Yes, there it is. It's in red there, and that endorses the delivery of a one pilot event at Elizabeth Lake in late February instead of late March because of the summer season. And it should read 2016 as a lead up, not as part of, as a lead up to the True North Festival.
Okay.
Yep. That clear?
Yep. And the mover's obviously satisfied. Yep. Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
All right, so we've got Councillor McCarthy's amendment and then Councillor Greco's amendment or adjustment to point 3, changing the date and the wording as a lead-up. Okay, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Greco, for that additional point. I'll just speak to the fourth point first, and then I'll talk to the substantive. There's been an extraordinary amount of work that's gone into this in a very short space of time. I know Councillor Walsh has met with some of the representatives. This event has, I suppose, possible mini festival almost, has grown rapidly, and I had the pleasure of speaking to all the key partners of the open air cinema concept on just last Thursday about the White Ribbon campaign, and they've generously incorporated White Ribbon as a key feature of their event proposed for this Friday, to the point where the clubs are very interested in being part of White Ribbon now, which is absolutely terrific. So we've got really bringing the clubs into that message, and of course also any proceeds that they gather on the night, any monies that are left over, they would like to contribute those to either Women's Health in the North or the Good Samaritan Inn. So if they can collect some money for those causes that actually connect to that, that would be great as well. What we have is a terrific event this Friday night. It's the pilot, as is outlined in the report, for an open-air cinema, and the open-air cinema is going to occur at Mayor Park. It has been supported by our CEO, which is great, and point 4 is about giving the organisers, subject to everything going generally fine on Friday night, giving the organisers the confidence to book in their next one, because they really want to do a Christmas event, so hence in December. They have already gathered interest from several hundred people who voted online in terms of their preferred film between three choices, being The Goonies, I think Labyrinth, and Back to the Future, and I'm proud to say that Back to the Future won, which is a great outcome for those of us that are future buffs. And of course, importantly, they've brought together a unique collaboration of a Fijian cricket club, a soccer club, the Thornbury Women's Neighbourhood House, local residents, and of course a number of other stakeholders as well. So this is really a great example of what Darebin's about, a community-led event supported by council standing beside, but not controlling the thing. It's actually a community-led event. But the critical thing, and this is why the White Ribbon campaign is really interesting, being part of the first of these events, is that talking with residents who are part of the Friends of Mayor Park group, and two women in particular who I spoke to about 2 years ago talking about Mayor Park, both of them said to me and responded to me and said they feel such a great connection with other locals in the area and such a great sense of safety with events like this coming down the line in terms of their use of that park. And I think if we can turn our public spaces into places that everyone owns and everyone's connected to, this is a great way to do it, by bringing people to a park and getting that sense of community. So I think it's going to be a terrific event. It's been well supported by the local community, and the Northcote Golf Course has also made their car park available. I'll end it there, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you,
and thanks to the
Councillor
office for all their work on it too.
Councillor Gregor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I thank Councillor McCarthy for bringing this initiative to the council, and also that we've been able to put into this initiative the use of the Edwards Park Lake. And that goes to that third point there in relation to having or experimenting or piloting at least one event at Edwards Park Lake. The slight change to the rather than late February is that the original motion that we had passed earlier on referred to the coming summer season, and doing it in late March, the days get shorter and the weather doesn't get too good, and so it would be better to actually do it in the February month so that we can guarantee greater participation. The other thing I'll just point out, Mr Mayor, is that we've done this in the past. When south of Heidelberg Road was part of Darebin, or was part of the old Northcote. The amphitheatre there, in that area there, near the boathouse there, was actually used, from memory, as a open air cinema, and it was a highly successful event where they used to show films there in the summer season. So I'm glad that we've been able to resuscitate this type of initiative for the Darebin area, and also particularly for the northern part of the city. I think that the lake lends itself to an activity like this. We know that we're trying to sort of revitalise the life and activity around the boathouse at our lake, and I think an initiative like this will be able to do that. Also, the other thing that I would throw in, and I hope that our officers can consider, is maybe doing silent movies, where therefore that language is not a barrier given the demographics of the northern part of the city. That used to be done in the Alphington area at the amphitheatre. So I hope that
Thank you,
officers can do that. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further comments,
I'll make a comment.
Councillor Walsh.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And it certainly is the night of Ulaka tonight. Mr Mayor, I'm pleased to support this, and I think we've got a good way forward now, because we're able to endorse and give confidence to that the Friends of Mayor Park Group can have simply giving principal support to them being able to have a second event in the lead up to Christmas. But certainly, if touch wood, heaven forbid, if Friday night doesn't go so well, we are in the position that we can review this now, which is obviously important. because there were obviously a number of issues which we were briefed about. So I think this is a good kind of midway point.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Can we invite Councillor Lawrence back into the room, please?
Happy to move the next one, Mr. Mayor.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
It's got another conflict.
That's fine.
Thanks, Councillor Lawrence, for joining us. We're now up to 8.15, 8.15.
Happy to move that, Mr.
Park,
Mayor.
Northcote Golf Course Master Plan. Hang on. Councillor Lawrence.
Mr Mayor, sorry for the
I do apologise, it's a procedure.
declare the same conflict of interest in regards to a family member owning property nearby this, and again will be vacating the chamber.
Thank you. Do we have a mover?
Happy to move that.
Councillor McCarthy, seconder. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, and I'd say
Councillor Walsh. Councillor McCarthy.
I'll keep it brief. This report sets out the proposed consultation process for the development of a master plan for Mayor Park and Northcote Golf Course. This is a proposal that we put to Council some months back, and it's great to have a proposal about how the consultation will occur. We have completed master plans at other major parks, and of course this is a unique situation, ties in very neatly with what we've just discussed, being the Beavers Road footbridge proposal, because it's about how we can build strong community ownership over these two spaces, activate the sites and get the best value. I would just want to first of all give a special note of thanks to the officers that initiated the construction of the exercise equipment on the corner of Leinster Grove and Normanby Avenue, which despite not having any play equipment in Mayor Park, that stuff is covered every day. There are kids climbing over it. It is the best used piece of equipment I've ever seen, and I don't think it all necessarily gets used for the purposes that it was designed. And what we've seen is a little bit of work has activated a great big site in a huge way. What hopefully this master plan process will do is identify the other opportunities that exist at Mayor Park and at Northcote Golf Course to strengthen that community connection. We know we've got declining use at Northcote Golf Course, but we want to see it continue to function as an important part of our recreational space. And so what can we do to support that operation there? And of course, what can we also do to support the clubs based at Mayor Park? And of course the other recreational uses that occur there, such as general play, a lot of walking and dog walking, and of course running and riding and passive recreation around there too. So there's some great opportunities. The consultation plan, as is outlined in the report, is quite in depth. It has a series of stages of consultations, a lot of on-site consultation, and of course opportunities for all the stakeholder groups, and they're all listed in there on page 103 to have their say, but also local residents to really feel ownership of this process. Already people have started talking about the potential to set up a community garden there, some play equipment at one point, and of course the opportunity for more regular community activities and council activities as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there, but a big one, Mr Mayor, and you'll know this for your own experience with other parks and ovals, is we need to make sure that we look after the ground, and we need to make sure that we have the right drainage arrangements. It is a landfill site, and we need to be conscious of that too. So we've got to take into account those risks with any works that might happen there, but it is a great open space, both sections, and we want to protect that, but also enhance it where we can.
It's a flood zone too.
It's a flood zone as well. Yeah.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. You know, I support this, but let me say from the outset, I support this with protection of the Northcote Golf Course. The Northcote Golf Course cannot become a, certainly would not support Northcote Golf Course becoming a casualty of this because the two can work well, but the Northcote Golf Course and the club there provides a valuable asset for so many people in the community. So I want to say that from the outset. But there is certainly potential to add to this and to improve the the site and both the two areas and make things more cohesive and that's fantastic. But we obviously need to protect both and yes, I wanted to say that, and particularly something else that I raised about Mayor Park in my second is the community feel that comes between friends of Mayor Park, but also the residents and also the Darebin United Soccer Club. So that's fantastic that the two communities can coincide, and it's such a good community feel because we don't see that enough in many issues surrounding this, as you would know, Mr. Mayor, with your experience in sport.
I actually think everyone gets along pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Can we ask Councillor Lawrence to come back and join us, please? Thank you, councillors. Next item is 8.16, the commencement of the statutory process to enter into lease agreements with Early Childhood Management Services Incorporated. Move Councillor Cetus, second Councillor Lee. Councillor Cetus.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is actually a good news story, and I'll draw councillor's attention that the actual service provider in question here is actually resident in Darebin. And I think that should be noted because as is the way with some of these tenders, unfortunately, we do get sometimes the balance of these being outside of the city of Darebin. So it's a nice one, and particularly in relation to this critical service that we actually have a local provider, and in this circumstance, actually taking into account the actual facilities that we've got towards the north of our city. And I would note my special affinity towards Keon Park Children's Hut, of course. So with this, we have received, I suppose, the benefit of the local provider, and I suppose to date they've been doing rather well, such as their preferment in the context of this report for them to be given the particular service contracts for the facilities in question, in namely, of course, Oak Hill, Darebin North East and Keon Park. And I think just in terms of value for money, critical mass associated with one service provider having, I suppose, a tender operation involving multiple sites will deliver value for money for the council and the community in general, and of course a standard of service that will be consistent across those sites. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Cetus. Councillor Lee, anything further to add?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I draw people's attention to page 107 of the report, where details of the rental is actually outlined in detail. It's pleasing to see that we are not charging the commercial rate. We're charging essentially $1 a week to some of these early childhood service providers. Let's face it, they provide some of the most critical and difficult jobs in this municipality, and as Councillor Cetus said, they do employ local youth and other early childhood development staff within the city of Darebin. And for that, they deserve all the assistance they can get, and I think that financial incentive of $1 a week in rent is the most appropriate incentive we can provide to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any further comments from councillors? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Councillors, we've already dealt with 8.17 and 8.18, so we'll now move over to notice of the motion. I actually need to request that we include notice of motion which has been omitted from tonight's agenda. So I'll put a vote that we include item 9. It's on the screen.
Suspension of standing orders first, Mr Mayor? To admit it?
Suspension of standing orders, moved by Councillor Setis, second Councillor Williams. All those in favour? That's carried. Now I request that we consider including item 9, long-term refugee solution in Northcote, as notice of motion. So I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour?
I just didn't hear the motion.
We need to include an item which has been omitted from tonight's agenda, which will appear on the screen now.
Thank you. And will that be admitted as the first item?
First item to be considered, yes. So Councillor Setis has moved, Councillor Williams has seconded. All those in favour? Okay, we'll now move to include this item which appears on screen as the first item as a notice of motion. I'll have councillors a few minutes to read that. It has been circulated previously today.
I'm happy to move it, but I'm aware there is an amendment. Is that correct, or has that been included already?
The amendment has been included in there. It doesn't appear with different colours, unfortunately, but it has been circulated today to councillors. Councillor Lawrence, you may have that copy there, so you know which part of the amendment has been included. That's better.
Mr Mayor, while people are reading it, that has been circulated. I'm happy to second the motion with the amendments which now appear in red.
Okay, so did you want to move it, Councillor Lawrence, yes?
Yes.
And second, Councillor Greco. Okay, so people are happy that they've read it. It's been circulated previously already today. If not...
just to be clear, the red is all of Councillor Greco's, and the final point is struck out. Is that correct?
Taken off.
That's it.
Yep, okay, thank you.
It's not often we omit items. It's rare, but on this occasion it has happened, so we need to include it.
Mr Mayor, so I'll just speak to this. Yes, this has bounced around for some time, but this motion reflects a range of projects that Council is looking at, and obviously Darwin Council's Housing Committee has been looking at, where in fact the previous Council also began looking at the parcels of land dotted through the city, sometimes in quite, unaffordable parts of the city that are in council hands, and could provide a model similar to Port Phillip's model of air rights being used to create accommodation. And there are a number of projects that are coming through to council. They're coming via various other normal processes, but it did appear there was one project parcel that was identified which wasn't linked to local homeless, targeting local homeless or local housing list, and that was the land that's actually the car park in front of Northcote Plaza running towards All Nations Park. Now obviously there is a 10-storey private residence that's been apartment that was built some years ago on top of Northcote Plaza, so there's a range of consultations and various things to look at, but for all intents and purposes there does look like there's 2 or 3 stories or more of potential air rights that could provide several hundred housing units, and these can take many forms in terms of assisting refugees. There are both short-term and long-term needs, and it depends on I guess what partners we can attract to this and look at that in terms of creating housing. As councils we're aware, there's people active in this area like Baptcare and other religious-based organisations. Baptcare themselves bought a block of 50 units on Bell Street about 3 years ago, and they're providing that to refugees and asylum seekers, many who do not have a way to make a living, so they provide subsidised housing. So there's a range of needs in terms of refugees, and we get to see what the actual structure and support structure that will come in with the 12,000 Syrian refugees, but we can expect that many of them will want to come into Melbourne because Melbourne is a very supportive community for multicultural communities. So it also makes sense to try and create housing on council-owned land close to where we have historically built up a lot of services to supply for migrant communities. So again, this is something worth exploring and something we should get on with as soon as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I thank Councillor Lawrence for putting forward this idea, but what my amendment does, with the past there in red, I think it helps to actually tidy up the motion. So, and I'll just go through what my amendments actually do. Firstly, it's seeking an in-principle commitment by council in relation to above-ground air rights to have to be used for a public housing or social housing project. That's the first thing that it does. Then secondly, what the motion then does is that it calls for council to prepare some briefing papers and to organise a series of roundtable conferences with interested social housing organisations and also the Refugee Council of Australia and other advocacy groups. So like that we can sit these people around the table and hear from them, including the state and federal representatives, and hear from them what the potential would be to actually embark on such an important housing projects here in the City of Darebin. We've spoken a lot about these types of projects, but I think what we need to do, and this is what my amendment does, is that we need to get the main players around the table, sitting down with us, and exploring what the possibilities are before we actually commit in terms of expressions of interest, documents and things like that. I think we need to do that groundwork, build up that groundwork, see what the interest is, see what council will actually be going to the table with some proposals and actually some land or some airspace, and then involving those other parties to see what can collaboratively be put together. Once we get all that information, then we're in a position to get updates on that process, and then we can take it from there. So this, my actually amendment takes the process into a step-by-step process.
Thank you, Councillor Greco.
Speaking against.
Councillor McCarthy?
I was just going to speak in favour, but I just wanted to ask one question before I do, because it just relates to Councillor Greco's point, which is whether there is any Darebin organisations included in that consultation process, as you see. Or whether it's inclusive of that. So the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council, other Darebin organisations that should be included. And there's also social housing providers in the City of Darebin who would obviously be...
Look, I put the relevant stakeholders. Yeah. Maybe we can actually add the word relevant local stakeholders to take those into account.
Thank you. Yep, all right. Thank you. Look, I'm pleased to support this. I'm not confident, to be frank, that we'll see any support from the current federal government for this type of initiative. So I think that in some respects, Councillor Greco is correct to sort of say, how do we bring together the various stakeholders to the table? Because we actually need to start thinking about how we can create housing for people and compassionate housing in places where there are good services, transport, etc., etc. And I think it's worth noting, and there's a little bit of history here that councillors might be aware of, is that this location was once a brick quarry, then it was a tip. At one stage it was a location for the Nissan huts where new migrants were housed. And likewise Northland, our other major shopping centre, was also a location for newly arrived migrants. And I know this because my own family used to take food and tools and equipment to people that have just arrived, and there was a much stronger sense that you would create housing, even if in that case it was temporary housing, close to where services and facilities exist, and compassionate communities. And I think it's also worth noting, Mr Mayor, that the people in Northcote are extraordinarily compassionate and have been vocal through the election processes, through polls and so on and so forth. They want to see more compassionate approaches from state and federal governments in particular in terms of the resettlement of refugees. I'm personally not confident that the federal government will take up Councillor Lawrence's proposal to look at this, but I think we as a city want to actually start a conversation with our residents, and I think with other levels of government, about how we create housing close to inner city areas, and we're not talking about the sorts of towers that exist in Fitzroy, and Collingwood, which have been in some cases wonderful experiences for some people and horrible experiences for others. because they have not been about integrating people, but rather keeping them in one location. We need to talk about how we integrate people into the community who are being resettled here. So I would like to see, if we're going to go down this path, to see us ask the question, how do we actually integrate people into the community, rather than saying, you live over there. It's not good enough to put people in far-flung suburbs. It's another thing not to put them disconnected from the broader community.
Any other speakers? Councillor Walsh.
Speaking against.
2 minutes.
Look, I support the refugee commitment from the current cabinet, from the current Abbott and Turnbull governments. Obviously, with Syrians escaping Daesh and Assad, and we need refugee housing. And that's important. But not passing such a motion, which is potentially reckless, because it's potentially giving the green light to damaging All Nations Park. This could really damage All Nations. This could damage All Nations Park, and this could damage the facilities around there. And I'm not prepared to see that happen. It will. It won't be a good thing. And this isn't. And this is a political game of And I think it's. And I do think it's wedge politics. But I'm not going to stand. I'm not going to stand by. And as sympathetic as we are to the situations of Syrians, particularly the Christians and the Yazidis, as sympathetic as we are, we can't. We've got to look after our own backyard, and we can't let. And we can't let All Nations Park be potentially compromised for a proposal like this. So I'm not comfortable in supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I might just go straight to a vote on this one. Councillors, we've heard the speakers for and against, so I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against?
Call a division.
Items carried. All those in favour, please stand up. I name Councillor Lee, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Williams, Councillor Sears, Councillor Fontana, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Greco. All those against? Councillor Walsh. And I'm not too sure where All Nations Park is mentioned anyway.
Yeah, it's at All Nations Park.
Yeah, it did somewhere.
Is there?
Yeah.
Beg your pardon. My apologies. Blue. Colourblind. Okay, next one, consideration is 9.1, safety concerns in Gordon Avenue, Preston. Councillor Williams.
I'll just be brief and...
Second is Councillor Lee. Councillor Williams.
There seems to be concerns regarding Gordon Grove when it comes to Christmas time. There's a particular house there that tends to blow everybody away in Darebin. They spend several months in doing up their house, front yard and their driveway in Christmas lights. And residents in the area come flocking there, especially with young kids leading up to Christmas, and it's creating such a hazard regarding traffic and safety concerns of children walking on the roads, and it's quite dark. So I've brought this to council, hoping that we can look at other ways of how we can use calming measures and ensuring that we have a better outcome regarding safety in that particular street.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any comments, Councillor Lee?
Yes, I want to commend Councillor Williams for bringing this issue to Council's attention. I know the address he speaks of. I visited there the last couple of Christmases with my family and my kids, and she's right, it's a well-known local attraction, and it does attract a fair number of foot traffic and car traffic. And with the festive season upon us, we certainly don't want to see any potential near misses or even any injuries as a result. So we do look forward to getting a report on this matter as soon as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. If there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item's carried. Next notice of motion is 9.2, big assessment in Queen Street Reservoir. Councillor Williams moves, Councillor Lee seconded. Councillor Williams.
Due to the increasing traffic travelling along Queen Street, it has raised concerns from residents and also fellow councillors that have brought the issue up. It is also a known fact that Queen Street is being used as a rat race with no indication of its speed, whether it's 40, 50 or 60 kilometres, and which is significantly raising safety concerns, and I'm hoping that the report will outline ways of lowering the volume and speed of vehicles that are actually travelling, which will significantly improve safety issues which residents have already mentioned. Safety is paramount for pedestrians, particularly school children, bike riders, and Dyson bus route, which is 567, that travels west along Tyler Street between Plenty Road and High Street over the new speed humps, and utilises Queen Street for the eastbound leg, as Tyler Street is obviously a one-way street. So that bus route goes down Tyler and it comes up Queen. So just to sum up, I'm just hoping that, let's hope that the residents living in this particular pocket of the neighbourhood get a great outcome which will improve the safety of this particular street.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Lee?
Yes, again, congratulate Councillor Williams for taking this initiative on this. Myself and other councillors have been contacted by residents here living in Queen Street with some of those traffic concerns, and he spoke very eloquently at the beginning of this meeting during public question time. I do look forward to receiving the report, particularly given the recent traffic measures that we implemented along Tyler Street and our $1.5 million in the traffic management plan that we just adopted under the previous 8.6 item on our agenda. So I do look forward to receiving the report and look at ways to address some of the legitimate concerns of our community in this area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just add a few words, if I may. Mr. Mayor, I actually attended that particular site, that particular street, on about it was about nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I can really see how the traffic, particularly from the east going. From west going to east, it's quite a lot of traffic that moves in that direction. I really hope that that in preparing this report, that the officers can work in a collaborative way with the residents, because they've actually done quite a lot of work and quite a lot of analysis on the information that they've been provided to by council officers. So hopefully there's a lot of goodwill there in that local street and by that local community. So hopefully there'll be quite a collaborative effort with our officers, because I'm sure we need some new solutions there, and I think it'll be good to work up some solutions with the commitment and the involvement of the residents in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. If there's no further comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. 9.3, former President Girls Secondary College, move it Councillor Lee. The seconder.
I'm happy to
Councillor
second.
Greco.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Greco. Look, I'm very pleased to speak on this issue. It's now 2 years since the closure of the President Girls Secondary College, just across the road from here. In fact, I think December 15th, I think, is actually the 2-year anniversary of the closure of the closure date of the President Girls Secondary College. And since the closure, there's been a grassroots community campaign that's been formed, and they call themselves High School Preston, and many members of our community and many members of our council are actually aware of that. They've done a terrific grassroots campaign, and they included lobbying local MPs leading up to the November election last year. And I know that our local member has worked very hard on this issue, and I want to be congratulated on this, because he actually took the Education Minister for a tour of the site. And in the words of the Education Minister, this is a really good site. So what we're asking for at the moment is really for it's time for the council to swing its weight, give its credibility behind this group, to actually provide some more impotence for this school to be open as soon as we can. I did attend the community consultation forum a couple of weeks ago, and during that conversation it was made clear that the consultants are looking at a 10-year time frame. But what the parents are saying loud and clear is that the education facility needs to be opened up right now in order to increase the educational opportunities and choices for our children. I'll leave it there, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Greco?
Yeah, look, I'm really happy that Councillor Lee has brought this to the attention of the council. I also attended the community consultation which Councillor Lee was present at, where we did get presentations from both the local member, who's the Minister for Finance and Multiculturalism, and Robin Scott, and also from the Education Department people. Look, in relation to the school, and I'm really glad that there is an action group, if you like, that's actually trying to get the school reopened again. Look, my belief is that the school should never have been closed in the first place. I mean, it's a good school, good facilities, and it just I'm just dumbfounded to this day why the school was actually closed. Mr. Mayor, just at the consultation, there was a lot of talk about the demographics, the numbers, projections, and things like that. But I think there was one community member that spoke, and he actually received quite a round of applause, where he said, basically, forget about the numbers, this is a no-brainer. The school should be open now. It should be open for the next school season in 2016, because it's actually a no-brainer for the community. A school is needed, and we've got a school there with great facilities, and it should be open. Having a feasibility study, yes, new data, new information may come out of that, but I think there's a preoccupation by the community that that's a little bit of a stalling tactic, and in order to put that date somewhere into the future. So I commend this motion, and I hope that councils will support the motion so that we can put pressure on the state government to reopen what has been a great school and that continues to serve the community.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any other speakers? Councillor Lawrence?
I'll speak against the motion. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can't quite support this motion in that in relation to point E, that jumps to conclusion about the council to take a definite date on when the school should be open. And obviously it's a crying shame that those facilities are not being used by the community right now, and they really should be. But there is issues that have gone on with planning of schools which impact on the enrolments and the zones. And in this school, previously we had the girls' school there, and the principal who was there now is the principal at William Reuven School, so someone who knows the demographics and enrolment patterns. And if this is open too early, I do concern that it will take away Central Reservoir as a catchment area for William Ruthven, and possibly force that school to close through lack of enrolments. So these are where we do need the data before we jump to conclusions. I am, of course, alarmed when I hear people talk from the Education Department that it should be a 10-year process before there's a new school. But I think we need to really be honest with our community about the numbers and about the fragility of some of the schools in our areas in Latrobe Ward, and about where the catchments are going to impact. Now, obviously, parents are still coping with the realignment of the Coburg School, which took in Preston West and large parts of Thornbury that was previously under Northcote zone. So this, of course, the zone for this school, if it's an open co-ed school, would actually redraw the boundaries for Coburg, Thornbury, Northcote, Reservoir and William Ruthven. And I think we really need to make sure the demographics are there to support all of our schools.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other speakers?
I'm going to speak in favour of the motion, and I prompted to because I happen to, in my non-council life, work in the education sector at the moment, and I must say it is a rare thing when you have a facility like this that is sitting vacant, and it is sitting vacant doing nothing. And we know, just looking at what is happening in our schools, Northcote High is busting at the seams. They literally can't take, they've had to put a cap, they've had to draw the boundaries tighter and tighter. They recently got in a bit of strife because they were charging fees for students to apply to go to the school. Thornbury High has a growing population, and they're doing some wonderful things as a school. In Reservoir we've got terrific schools. Reservoir High had an amazing achievement as one of the safe schools in all of Victoria, and really inclusive work that's happening there. But I tell you what, we've got a growing population, and I think that the point here is that by putting a bit of pressure, as Councillor Lee has proposed, to get this up and running by 2017, might mean that you actually open it by 2017 and you've got your first classes, but you don't necessarily have the whole thing doesn't happen at once. And with every school that we've had this process go through, and I was at one today in another part of Melbourne, it takes a bit of time. So we need to get some skin in the game here. The council has made a commitment to this previously, this campaign. Here is an opportunity for the state government to really say we want to see this school flourishing by the time we get around to the next election, which is actually the following year, 2018. If it's left to 2018, it's going to be 2019. So the time to commit is now. The time to commit is to get on with it now. And the longer that we wait, the more those facilities will deteriorate. We only have to see what happened when Preston Girls closed down and other schools were advised they could go in and strip the place of its facilities and equipment. And that occurred. And that's when we had the broken glass and the safety issues. We don't want to see a recurrence of that. We need to get people in there, get these facilities going, and I think Councillor Lee is spot on in putting a bit of pressure on there.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I might put that to a vote. We've had 4 speakers in relation to 4 against.
I have a right reply, Mr Mayor?
We've had 3, 4, 1 against. Go ahead, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to exercise my right of reply. I think it's important that some issues need to be dealt with. I understand and I appreciate the fact that residents in Reservoir have a choice of 2 public high schools, William Ruthven and Reservoir High School. For the parents in Preston, they actually got no high school, no public high school, yet there are 5 public primary schools here in Preston. So there is enough feeder students to demand for a school in Preston area. And as Councillor McCarthy said, and as we know what happened in Coburg, what we're witnessing is not an influx of people to Coburg High School, but a gradual intake from year 7 and having that gradually increase incrementally over the next 4 or 5 years until they reach the year 12 level. So if by a miracle, and I do mean that by a miracle, we do have the doors open by 2017, we're not going to see a huge influx of students. What we're seeing is a gradual uptake because people recognizing that there is an educational choice and opportunity for their kids in Preston that's not available to them at this point in time since the closure of Preston Girls High School. If we want to look at statistics and data, just about a week ago I noticed in The Age that the Victorian economy has grown by 2.5%. That's actually driven by population growth. 1.7% population growth, the fastest in the country. And when people grow, they will have families, and when we have families, they demand education. And I think as a council, it is now our responsibility to advocate on behalf of our community, lobby the state government to increase the educational choices for our children in our municipality. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'll now put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? The item's carried.
Division, please, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lee's call for division. All those in favour, please stand. I name Councillor Lee, Councillor Williams, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Cedars, Councillor Fontana, Councillor Walsh, Councillor Greco. Those against, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you, councillors. Next item is has been removed. 9.4 has been incorporated into the agenda item 8.4. Next item is then 9.5, the retention and reinstatement of trees along St George's Road. Moved by Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Walsh. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd first like to acknowledge that we have a couple of the residents here who were part of the first or the previous incarnation of this process, which was the battle to get commitment to being able to plant trees along St George's Road. And I want to pay respect to the work that they did then and the work that they are still doing now as part of what is a blooming and blossoming community campaign. In fact, I think it clicked over 1,000 online signatures just recently, the vast majority of whom are local residents who love the avenue of trees along St George's Road along the median there, which are currently at risk because Melbourne Water, despite their platitudes to say that it's up to council to decide what is planted there, their own guidelines, which are much tighter than what previously existed, prohibit planting of a whole range of trees along that section. And so what we are facing with the M40 pipeline replacement project is obviously the trees being ripped out, the ground cover being ripped out, the shared path being ripped out, and in return, what will we get in over a year's time, 18 months' time? Maybe some agapanthus, maybe some plantings along there, but certainly not the wonderful trees that we have there that provide such great amenity and shade and a real sense of a location, which you only have to hear the way the real estate agents talk about St George's Road as a great place, a thriving place. I don't want to spruik their business, but I'll tell you what, they know where there's value, and the value is in the amenity and the safety that the people feel in that space, because it is not a wasteland, it is a nice and attractive place. There are issues around cyclist pedestrian safety, but we will address those hopefully through the Great Northern Bikeway project, which needs to be funded as well. What my motion proposes to do is do in fact what was done in the 90s, which is seek a directive from the Minister for Water in this case, a directive to Melbourne Water that trees providing shade be allowed to be retained and reinstated along St George's Road. This will circumvent and cut through the block that currently exists with Melbourne Water's pipeline. It will ensure that those trees that we currently have, being the palms and a range of other species, wherever possible can be retained and kept safe off-site, and then ideally returned in many cases. Certainly has been the case with palm trees and possibly other species as well. We want to see not just a retention of these trees, we want to see more plantings, because we know that's what makes St George's Road a nice place to ride, walk, drive, catch the tram along, and there has been, according to all the research and all the evidence presented so far, no evidence in fact that of any actual direct damage from any of those trees to the pipe. So this is a bit of over-analysis from Melbourne Water, and I think that our community will suffer unless we see that ministerial directive that says this is important. It was important in the 90s, it's important again here in 2015.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's and thanks, Councillor McCarthy, for putting it forward. And I too would like to thank the residents who are here for their long work and advocacy on this, because it is important to if possible certainly to keep and retain the trees trees along St George's Road, because it provides it does provide shade and for residents, and obviously along St George's Road, improving the footprint of the shared bike path is also a safety issue there with pedestrians as well. But Councillor McCarthy has said it all, or most of what I'd say, so I'm going to, in the interest of time, move it on.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Williams, you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just a little confused, because when the consultants came from Melbourne Water to Council for briefing, I did request on the night that it was paramount that we kept shading for that area, and they did say that they had to still go through the consultation at the point that they would even consider putting the plants in a nursery to keep them looked after until they were ready to be reinstated. I'm just confused about what was given to us in briefing and this particular notice of motion. Like, is the notice of motion saying that we're going to get the palms trees back, or any shading, or?
Councillor McCarthy.
Oh look, I think Melbourne Water themselves has given away the real game here in their comments in the paper just a week or two ago, where they wouldn't commit to retention and retaining the existing trees or trees of a like nature. And I think it's becoming very clear with their guidelines that the guidelines actually restrict the planting of trees such as the ones that we currently have there once the pipeline is reintroduced. So I think we were given a very convenient answer at our internal briefing in relation to the preservation off-site of those trees, but there has been no commitment, and certainly no commitment in the media statements or in the guidelines, that what we have there at the moment can be retained and restored and returned in the way that we would expect it to be. And I think it's a very reasonable assumption to make that should go back into like for like, but clearly that's not the case in the guidelines and also the media statements that they've made since then. So thank you. Hence, we need a ministerial guarantee. Thank you, Mr. Not a traffic report. This is
No, anyway. Okay, I'll put that to a vote. Councillors, all those in favour? That item is carried.
And if you can have that noted as unanimous, please.
That's unanimous recording of that item. Okay, next item is urgent business, revenue urgent business, Mr. CEO.
Mr. There is one, your indulgence, just to explain. This is from Councillor McCarthy, Trent McCarthy, and he raised that with the councillors at 1 today. Since then, he has been working with the staff to get the wordings right. Unfortunately, we couldn't circulate that. Having said that, why it's urgent? Because I need to accept it, because this is to do with the Ben Street developer occupying a land and continuing to do the work. So if anything, we need to do that urgent. That's why I accepted that.
Okay, so we'll now list that.
Yeah,
It's
coming.
What about, I think we need to move it
No,
and
we
be
don't.
accepted.
Yes, the council need to move as urgent business.
We don't need to
Happy-
suspend standing, we just need to accept it.
Happy
So
to,
let's get it on
move.
screen so people know what it is first. I'll put it to a vote that we accept the late urgent item. All those in favour?
Can we just read it? I'm not seeing it.
To accept it onto the agenda.
Mover was Councillor McCarthy, seconder was Councillor Williams.
Yes, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're changing. We
I'm
just
happy
need to
to
change,
second
oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, one change here, Councillor McCarthy, if that's okay.
So we
Point 3, just point 3, next meeting to enable enforcement action to investigate possible enforcement action.
Instead of initiate, investigate,
Yeah, possible.
replace.
To be investigated.
To investigate enforcement action, yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to take on board the advice. I understand that there has been an establishment of what has taken place, but happy to take that advice
To
on board.
investigate, yeah.
Yep.
We're actually directing here. Okay, so councillors happy with that?
There's a D.
Sorry?
Instead of enable, investigate.
Okay,
He's somebody that was
we've done it.
Did you want to read it out for those who are on the video who don't see the back screen?
I think if I can correctly...
We've got the wording in the wrong order. Receive a report at council's next meeting to investigate enforcement action. Not enable, move enable.
No, back, that was,
Point 3,
Or to consider
to
enforcement.
investigate enforcement action
Yep.
in relation.
get rid of the second investigate.
To be investigated.
Get rid of it to the
You
second
got the second
investigate.
investigate, get rid of that.
Investigate.
Yep. Perfect.
And it should just be enforcement action in relation to.
I've got a question.
Okay, we got that one's question, Councillor Walsh.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, would councillors be invited to this meeting, and if not, could that be included in the notice of motion?
Happy to take some words on board. I'm not able to. I don't think.
I think we will just assume that yes, councillors will be invited.
I think I'm happy to add the words meeting with residents and councillors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the mover was Councillor McCarthy. And Councillor Williams is second. Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Councillors would be aware of the issues at this site that have been brought about on a couple of fronts. I'm not going to go to the proposed state of right-of-way matter, which is not being considered this evening, but it has become a catalyst, I think, for discussion of the two matters that I've raised there. One is the traffic management plan, which has been imposed or proposed for the next period of the development activity. It sees a large number of trucks. The figure I've heard is around 600, some of whom have already gone through the area, actually being funnelled down through Bed Street, Herbert Street and down at Beavis Road to St George's Road, rather than taking a High Street exit. It is a development that is on High Street, and so there is a very strong and reasonable concern from residents that trucks, very large trucks, are being funnelled down quite residential streets when they could take another access point. So that needs to be unpacked and considered with them to see what other options are available. And there are safety issues on both fronts that need to be properly considered, and obviously an attempt to see if there are changes that can be made to the traffic management plan to take on board those concerns and provide a safer outcome for everyone. It is a massive development. I think it's 8 stories from memory, and it's going to take at least a year for it to occur. So the people that live in Bent Street are living with this now, and they'll keep living with it for some time ahead. And they need to be given the greatest respect for what they're about to go through, because I don't envy them one bit. The third point is probably the one that pricked my concern most, which is actually that the developer in this case is occupying council land, being the right-of-way, and my understanding is that has not been authorised. It is potentially in breach of regulations and rules, and we need to take that very seriously, and hence my hope that we might have that considered at the next meeting about whether enforcement action should be taken in this case, because if you drop litter on the ground, you get a fine. You park your car in the wrong spot, you get a fine, and we should be taking developers on in these matters when they are not following council's rules, and the impost on residents is significant as well. So I'll end it there.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams.
Look, this is an urgent matter that really is involving safety concerns, noise management, traffic flow, and obviously planning issues which need to be resolved and looked at as ASAP.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. If there's no further...
Just very quickly, Mr Mayor. Look, I support this motion, and particularly in relation to point 3. Look, I think that, as Councillor McCarthy pointed out, there's the developers are occupying land which is owned by council, and there's a potential there that there is a clear breach, and I really think that the council must need to be much more rigorous in terms of its enforceability of the planning conditions or the other building conditions in relation to that particular land. Because as Councillor McCarthy said, here we have a situation where none of the land's been occupied, but a hole being dug into council land, and council is not even doing much about that. And I think that when somebody inadvertently parks a car in a spot where they're not supposed to park a car, cop $150, $160 fine. So I think we need to get our priorities right in terms of who we go after.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any further comments from councillors? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and this is
something new, hopefully, because I'm hearing repetitive stuff.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Obviously this is important, and I guess what I'd say is that what's happening in Ben Street is is very concerning for these residents, and I've spoken to residents about this issue as well. But also, it's not the only place where issues like this can happen, and there's one which I'm looking into on Clarendon Street as well. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Any further comments from councillors? If
Put
not,
the vote.
I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried.
If we can have that noted, is unanimous, please, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. We'll note that unanimous. There's no further other further items?
No.
Okay. There's no general business items tonight, councillors.
No.
No. There's no.
No, there isn't. But I do need to make a quick declaration, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Just in the confidential agenda item number 1. I do need to note, I did declare conflict of interest. I originally was going to note as interest, just that the winning bidder did install a private solar PV system in my house, but not only that, but I also provided a customer feedback testimonial on the website. So on that basis, I'll be leaving that for conflict.
Next item we're looking at is item 12. We have a recommendation there for item 12.
Mr Mayor, it's okay, I'll move that we move it together.
We've still got item 12, reports by mayors and council, recommendations that council note the reports. Move Councillor Seatus, Councillor Williams has seconded. All those in favour? That's moved. That's our new format. I do apologise and explain to the gallery. Our new format is just to note our reports, our attendances as per the recommendation on item 12. We're now into item 13, consideration of reports considered confidential. Councillor Seatus has moved to go into camera. Councillor Williams seconded. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of the gallery, we do need you to leave the chambers for a moment. We're considering items which are confidential. So